Hello and welcome to the OMFG run, and this is usually a video that I should have done before I started the campaign, but I felt that I should put it in front of the campaign because lately I'm getting my ass handed to me quite substantially whilst playing that campaign, and I was asking myself, like, how difficult is this OMFG run compared to like normal difficulty? And whilst difficulty is a complex thing to grasp and like boiling it down to one single number, I was still trying to give it a shot. And the way I wanted to compare it is I wanted to talk about how OMFG run and legendary Ironman differ from one another. For those of you who wonder what the OMFG run is, pretty simple. Speaking, we are using no squad upgrades, so it's a 4-man run. We're using no weapon upgrades, so it's a ballistic only run. We are using the beta strike feature from XCOM2, which will double all of the enemy hit points. And last but not least, we're using permanent dark events just to spice it up a bit because it's not difficult enough. At the end, the question of difficulty, therefore, kind of boils down to the question: if you play it optimally, how fast can you actually kill an enemy squad? So I will start with really comparing the values of how much damage would you normally deal, and then from there you can get a sense almost as of how difficult it is to play the campaign, or why it is as difficult as it is. I am not factoring in any like special abilities because, quite frankly, they are such as rapid shot, chain shot, face off, fanfire, and so on and so forth. Because, quite frankly, they will not differ between a normal legendary Ironman run and an OMFG run. So I'm really looking at the substantially different topics. So without further ado, let's get into what I was trying to compare. If you look at the very first piece, the ballistic question about what is the effect, so to speak, let's break it down to numbers. And if you look at a typical party composition of an assault, a specialist, a grenadier, and a sniper, assuming that the assault and the specialist will use normal assault rifles, and grenadier and sniper will use their respective specific weapons, you would end up with an average of 34 damage per round if all of the shots hit, not accounting for any critical damage and so on and so forth. But like I said, that wouldn't make really a difference because also in the OMFG run you can likewise crit. So just substantially, if you only look at ballistic versus plasma weapon, you will see that with a fully built out squad of plasma weapons, you would end up with 34 points of damage, whilst in the OMFG run, just starting with ballistic weapons only, same composition, would end up with 18 damage. So that's kind of the base where we start with this argumentation. Going further though, you need to put into account that certain enemies will have armor, and that armor likewise is impeding both sides. Again, there is a lot of options like shredding, specifically with grenades, and also with the shredder ability, plus a couple of specific covered operations that allow you to even increase the shredding. But at the end, it boils down to enemies will still have armor, and you will still need to deal with it in one form or another. Half of the Advent forces in the later parts of the game, Advent shield bearer captains, and to a certain degree the normal stun lancers and troopers as well, will have armor. Chrysalids will have armor, Andromedons will have armor, Towers will have armor, Sectopods and Gatekeepers will have a lot of armor. So you will see a lot of that happening. And the way I wanted to account for it is really, I mean, I was just referring to the couple of enemies that will have armor. I was also putting into account, yes, you're going to shred it over time, but like, let's say on average, you're going to lose 2 points of damage towards armor. Sometimes it's not shredded, sometimes you need to shred it before going in, and since about half of the enemies will have armor, that's even reducing it further. Now, that's all that is to say for ballistic weapons itself. they will have the same, let's say, fixed reduction of armor. Matter of fact, they will even be over proportionally disadvantaged because their core damage is way lower than the damage of plasma weapons. So with 2 damage, minus 2 damage, I'm probably on the very aggressive side and not on the conservative side. You can easily make an argument to say it takes away 4 damage because it takes some time to just go through the armor. Now, looking at permanent dark events, I basically scanned through all of the permanent dark events because I got a couple of very rough ones in the playthrough that I'm currently playing on. And some of them will just effectively make your life miserable. And the real difference between permanent dark events and not permanent is that you need to stick up with them over time. And I took 3 out of many of them just to give you an appreciation of what you can see. Like I said, there are like dozens others, and the problem is that permanent dark events basically stack up, and you can easily end up between 8 to 12 dark events that are constantly running. And they are effectively reducing or making it more difficult for you. Either they are increasing the enemy pack size, which means more hit points to go through, or, and I selected 3 of them as an example, they are effectively reducing the damage that you are doing. I.e., sealed armor makes the every advent immune to fire, poison, and acid. No more acid grenades, no more poison grenades, no more fire grenades. And the debuffs and the dots on them will also not work. Lightning reflexes basically takes away the option to go for Overwatch traps, or simply speaking, the hardcore Advent alloy padding, +1 armor and +1 health. So I, again, on the very low side, that at least on average is going to reduce your damage by 1. Probably you can make an argumentation that it is even further reducing the armor and making it more difficult for you. Next up, I was accounting for the 4 men piece, and I wanted to make it easy in the calculation and basically just say, if you run with 6 people, I'll just multiply the damage by 1.5 because, quite frankly speaking, it really doesn't matter which 2 other classes you put in. You will have on average a similar damage output. And last but not least, I looked at the Better Strike feature, which gives the enemies twice the amount of hit points, which you can also just calculate in as minus 50% of damage, because I'm interested in the overall damage compared to the overall pack health. So how many hit points does a pack of enemies have at their disposal, and how much damage compared to their overall hit points am I doing? Because in XCOM2, what drives the difficulty is mainly how fast you can dispatch enemies. So if they are staying on the battlefield, they will continue to wreak havoc. And the unfortunate outcome, really, or the surprising outcome, which also explains a lot of why am I getting my ass kicked so much, is if you look at a normal squad of 4 people, 6 people at the end with plasma weapons, surprisingly enough, most of the average packs in the very end game will scale in between 50 and 65 hit points. That's 50 on the lower side, which is kind of the triple Advent pack. 65 on the higher side, which is more the Sectopod +1 or 2 companions. So interestingly enough, without even using special abilities, the equipment itself and the fact that you have 6 people, if you hit all of the shots, will almost kill all of the enemies in 1 turn, which again shows that if you keep up with the research curve, you will probably end up in a very okay-ish situation. At the end, there's a reversed difficulty curve. So in the end game, XCOM is rather getting easier than more difficult. It is quite the contrary on the OMFG side, where basically you can see that the net damage that you're dealing in terms of pack health is only about 12.5% of their overall health. So in a sense, what you're dealing with is just incredibly high amounts of hit points, and you need to kind of cheese slash strategize your way through it. And that's really what this run is all about. It should give you a little bit of a teaser with what is to be expected in the OMFG run. If you are interested in how to still play on such a difficulty and still kind of enjoy it, then feel free to chime in and give this run a try.